When three cruel bullies chase a new black girl through her quiet suburban neighborhood, they think she's alone, helpless, and easy to scare. But just as they close in on her driveway, two massive military dogs explode from the shadows, stopping the bullies cold with teeth bared and eyes locked. What starts as a simple walk home turns into a shocking showdown, shaking the entire neighborhood. And when a twisted video surfaces online, painting her as the villain, the world turns against her overnight. But these bullies' families have secrets buried deep. Can one brave girl and her loyal dogs expose the truth before powerful enemies destroy her family for good? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Maya Bell stood in the driveway, watching the moving truck pull away. The late August heat pressed down on her like a heavy blanket, making her cotton t-shirt stick to her back. Their new house wasn't big or fancy, but its white siding and navy shutters looked neat against the backdrop of tall Georgia pines. "That's the last of them," Sergeant Luther Bell said, setting down a box labeled "Kitchen" on the front porch. His dark skin glistened with sweat, but his posture remained military straight, despite his 67 years. "Ready to see your room, Maya?" She nodded, trying to ignore the prickling sensation of being watched. Across the street, a woman in yoga pants had stopped watering her flowers to stare at them. When Maya caught her eye, the woman gave a quick wave and hurried inside. "Yes, sir," Maya replied, grabbing a lighter box of her clothes. The wooden steps creaked under her feet as she followed her grandfather into their new home. The interior was cooler, though not by much. They'd need to get the AC running soon. Maya's footsteps echoed through empty rooms as she climbed the stairs to the second floor. Her bedroom faced the backyard, with a window seat perfect for reading. She set down her box and ran her hand along the pale blue walls. "It's nice," she said, more to convince herself than anything else. Moving from their old apartment in Atlanta hadn't been her choice, but after her grandmother passed away last spring, Sergeant Bell had decided they needed a fresh start. A sharp bark from outside made Maya jump. She rushed to the window, relief flooding through her at the familiar sight of Valor and Echo in their temporary kennel. The two German shepherds wagged their tails when they spotted her. "They're settling in just fine," her grandfather said from the doorway. "Once we get the fence checked, they can patrol the yard properly." Maya smiled at his choice of words. Even retired, her grandfather never stopped thinking like a military canine handler. "Can I let them out now? They've been cooped up all morning." "Let's meet some neighbors first," he said. "Don't want to startle anyone before proper introductions." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Maya followed her grandfather downstairs, where he opened the door to find a middle-aged white couple standing on their porch with a covered dish. "Welcome to Willow Creek," the woman said, her smile a little too wide. "I'm Susan Matthews, and this is my husband Dave. We're 3 houses down." She thrust forward what looked like a casserole dish. "Thought you might be hungry after moving all day." "That's mighty kind of you," Sergeant Bell said, accepting the dish with a polite nod. "I'm Luther Bell, and this is my granddaughter Maya." Maya noticed how Susan's eyes darted between them, lingering a beat too long. Dave shifted his weight from foot to foot. "We, noticed you have dogs," Dave said, gesturing toward the backyard. "Big ones." "Yes, sir," Sergeant Bell replied evenly. "Retired military working dogs, both fully trained and certified." "Oh, military?" Susan's smile wavered slightly. "How interesting. Well, just so you know, the HOA has strict rules about pets, dangerous breeds and all that." "They're not dangerous," Maya said quickly. "They're really well trained." "I'm sure they are, sweetie," Susan cut in with a patronizing tone that made Maya's jaw clench. "We just want everyone to feel safe in the neighborhood." "Safety is my priority too," Sergeant Bell said firmly. 25 years as an Army K-9 handler taught me that well enough. An awkward silence followed. Maya heard distant laughter and turned to see a group of teenage boys walking past the house. They slowed down to stare, whispering among themselves before continuing on. "Those must be some of your new classmates," Susan said brightly. Willow Creek High has a wonderful student body. Very traditional values. Maya's stomach tightened at the way Susan emphasized those last words. Her grandfather must have sensed her discomfort because he straightened up even more. "Thank you for the welcome," he said. "We should get back to unpacking." After the Matthews left, Maya helped her grandfather put away dishes and arrange furniture until the sun began to set. Finally, he nodded toward the backyard. "Go on and check on Valor and Echo. They've been patient long enough." Maya didn't need to be told twice. She hurried outside, where the evening air had cooled slightly. The backyard was decent-sized, surrounded by a wooden fence that her grandfather had already inspected twice. Valor and Echo whined excitedly as she approached their kennel. She opened the gate, and they bounded out, pressing against her legs in greeting. Despite their impressive size and training, they were gentle with her, as always. "Good boys," she murmured, scratching behind their ears. Echo licked her hand while Valor surveyed their new territory, his ears alert to every sound. More laughter drifted from the street. Those boys again, passing by for the second time. Maya tensed, but Valor and Echo's presence made her feel secure. She watched them explore the yard, their powerful bodies moving with grace and purpose. Standing there in the growing dusk, Maya felt a small measure of peace settle over her. Whatever challenges this new place might bring, she wasn't facing them alone. Maya's alarm buzzed at 6 a.m. sharp. She lay in her new bed for a moment, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of morning in suburbia. Birds chirping, a car starting somewhere down the street, and the steady breathing of Valor and Echo, who had slept in her room last night. "First day," she whispered to herself, pushing back the covers. The dogs lifted their heads, watching as she picked through moving boxes for her carefully chosen outfit. Dark jeans and a purple top that her grandmother had given her last Christmas. In the bathroom, Maya took extra time with her hair, making sure each twist was perfectly neat. Her reflection stared back at her, brown eyes serious beneath carefully shaped eyebrows. She touched the small gold necklace at her throat, another gift from her grandmother, and took a deep breath. Downstairs, she found Sergeant Bell already in the kitchen, dressed in his usual pressed khakis and polo shirt. The smell of eggs and toast filled the air. "Morning, baby girl," he said, sliding a plate in front of her as she sat down. "Ready for your first day?" Maya poked at her eggs with her fork. "I guess so." Her grandfather sat across from her, his own plate untouched. "Maya, look at me." She met his steady gaze. Even after retiring, he carried himself with the same quiet authority he'd had in uniform. "You're stronger than you know," he said. "Your grandmother saw it, and I see it too. Don't let anyone make you doubt yourself." Maya nodded, throat tight at the mention of her grandmother. "And remember," he continued, "Valor and Echo are here if you ever feel unsafe. I've already spoken with the school. They know about our situation, and you have permission to call me immediately if anything happens." "Yes, sir," Maya said, managing a small smile. "But I don't think I'll need to. It's just school, right?" Her grandfather's expression remained serious. "Sometimes the quietest places hide the most danger. Keep your eyes open and your head high." After breakfast, Maya grabbed her backpack and gave each dog a quick pat goodbye. They whined softly, as if sensing her nervousness. The walk to the bus stop took exactly 7 minutes. Maya had timed it yesterday. She stood alone at the corner, watching other students gather in small groups further down the street. No one approached her. On the bus, she found an empty seat near the middle. As more students got on, she noticed how they filled in around her, leaving the seats beside and behind her conspicuously empty. Whispers and glances followed her like shadows. Willow Creek High School was a sprawling brick building with white columns out front, trying hard to look like something from an old movie. Maya joined the stream of students flowing through the main entrance, clutching her schedule tight. Her first class was English. She arrived early, choosing a seat near the window. As other students filed in, the whispers grew more obvious. "Did you see who moved in on Oak Ridge? I heard they have attack dogs. My mom says the property values are going to drop." Maya kept her eyes on her notebook, drawing small spirals in the margin. The teacher, Mrs. Harrison, was a thin woman with graying hair who barely looked up as she took attendance. The morning passed in a blur of new faces and poorly hidden stares. By lunch period, Maya's shoulders ached from the tension of holding herself straight and proud, like her grandfather had taught her. The cafeteria was a sea of circular tables, most already claimed by clearly established groups. Maya found an empty spot at the end of a table near the wall. She unpacked her lunch, another thing her grandfather had insisted on, not wanting her to have to stand in line the first day. That's when she heard them. "Well, look who it is." The voice was loud enough to carry. Maya looked up to see 3 white boys approaching her table. The one in front was tall and athletic-looking, wearing a football jersey. He had the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "I'm Chad," he announced, stopping right in front of her table. "Chad Thompson. And these are my friends Kyle and Derek." He gestured to the other 2, one stocky with a crew cut, the other lanky with a permanent sneer. Maya said nothing, focusing on her sandwich. "That's some interesting hair you've got there," Chad continued, his voice carrying across the now quieting cafeteria. "Must take a lot of work to get it to do." "Whatever that is." Kyle, the stocky one, snickered. "Yeah. What do you call that style anyway?" "Probably doesn't wash it," Derek added, pulling out his phone. "Hey, maybe we should document this for the school paper. New students' unique fashion choices." Maya felt her cheeks burn as she heard the click of Derek's camera. Around them, other students were turning to watch, some giggling, others just staring. "And that complexion," Chad went on, leaning closer. "Must be hard to find makeup that matches, huh? Do they even make your shade at the mall?" Maya's hands trembled slightly as she packed up her barely touched lunch. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her head. "Don't let them see you cry, baby. That's what they want." She stood up slowly, keeping her face carefully blank, despite the hot tears threatening behind her eyes. The cafeteria had grown almost silent, watching the scene unfold. Not a single person spoke up or moved to help. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalks of Willow Creek as Maya walked home from the bus stop. The air was thick with late summer heat, making her backpack feel heavier with each step. After the incident in the cafeteria, she'd spent the rest of the school day trying to make herself invisible, keeping her head down and speaking only when called on by teachers. The suburban streets were quiet at this hour. Most people were still at work, their perfectly manicured lawns empty and still. Maya counted the houses as she passed them, a habit she'd developed to keep her mind occupied. 12 houses until home. 11. 10. A loud engine roar shattered the peace, making her jump. Maya's heart began to race as she recognized the sound. A pickup truck, the same one she'd seen Chad Thompson climbing into after school. The engine revved again, closer this time, the sound echoing off the rows of identical houses. Maya kept walking, forcing herself not to run. Running would only encourage them. Her grandfather's military training had taught her that much. Never show fear to those who want to intimidate you. The truck appeared behind her, moving at a crawl. Maya could hear male voices laughing, then the squeal of tires as they gunned the engine again. She flinched despite herself. "Hey!" Chad's voice called out. "New girl! Don't you want a ride?" Maya kept her eyes forward. 8 houses to go. 7. "Come on," Kyle's voice joined in. "We just want to be friendly." The truck crept alongside her now. Maya could see it in her peripheral vision. A red Ford F-150, lifted high on oversized tires. Chad was behind the wheel, with Kyle in the passenger seat and Derek in the back. "What's wrong?" Derek called out. "Too good to talk to us?" Maya's hands tightened on her backpack straps. 6 houses. 5. The truck revved again, pulling slightly ahead of her before slowing to match her pace. Maya could smell the exhaust, feel the rumble of the engine in her chest. "Maybe she doesn't speak English," Kyle suggested, loud enough for his voice to carry clearly. "Do you understand us? Should we speak slower?" 4 houses. 3. Chad gunned the engine again, making the truck lurch forward before braking hard. Maya stumbled slightly, her heart pounding. She could see her house now, the familiar shape of it offering both relief and new anxiety. She didn't want them to know where she lived. "Look at her run away," Derek taunted, "just like her kind always does." 2 houses. The truck surged forward once more, tires squealing against asphalt. Maya watched it speed past her house and around the corner, the sound of their laughter trailing behind it. She stood at the end of her driveway for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands were shaking as she pulled out her house key. The front door opened before she reached it. Sergeant Bell stood in the doorway, his expression concerned. Valor and Echo flanked him, their ears perked forward, attentively. "Maya?" he called out. "Everything all right?" She climbed the porch steps, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I'm fine, Grandpa." But Luther Bell hadn't survived 3 tours overseas without learning to read people. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder as she reached the door. "No, you're not. Come inside and tell me what happened." In the kitchen, Maya sat at the table while her grandfather poured her a glass of water. The dogs settled at her feet, their warm presence comforting. "There were some boys," she finally said, staring at the glass. "In a truck. They followed me home." Luther's face hardened, but his voice remained calm. "The same ones from school?" Maya nodded, then told him about the cafeteria incident. With each word, she could see the military bearing in her grandfather's posture becoming more pronounced. "Listen to me," he said when she finished. "You are safe here. Those boys might think they run this neighborhood, but they've never dealt with someone like me before." He reached across the table and took her hand. "If this continues, I'll speak to the school myself. And if that doesn't solve it, we'll take it higher." "I don't want to make trouble," Maya whispered. "Standing up for yourself isn't making trouble," Luther replied firmly. "It's making a change. Your grandmother taught you that." Maya squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his certainty. Below the table, Valor and Echo pressed closer to her legs, as if adding their own reassurance. Maya arrived early at school the next morning, hoping to avoid any confrontations in the crowded hallways. The building was quiet, with only a few students shuffling through the corridors. She made her way to her locker, rehearsing her grandfather's words in her head. "Standing up for yourself isn't making trouble." The words died in her throat when she saw her locker. Someone had written, "Go home," across it in thick black marker. The letters were crude and angry, slashing across the beige metal. Maya's hands trembled as she tried her combination, getting it wrong twice before the lock finally clicked open. Inside, everything looked untouched, but she checked her books anyway. The familiar weight of her textbooks provided little comfort today. She grabbed what she needed for her morning classes, trying to ignore the whispers that had started behind her. "Did you see what someone did?" "Serves her right." "Shh, she'll hear you." Maya slammed her locker shut harder than necessary, the bang echoing through the hallway. A few students jumped, then quickly looked away when she turned around. Their faces showed a mix of guilt and something else. Satisfaction, maybe, like they were glad someone had put her in her place. First period was English. usually her favorite subject. Today, though, she couldn't focus on the discussion of To Kill a Mockingbird. The irony wasn't lost on her, as the teacher led a sanitized conversation about racism in the 1930s, while half the class kept shooting glances at Maya, the only black student in the room. In chemistry, her lab partner suddenly forgot to share their notes from yesterday. Math class wasn't any better. When Maya raised her hand to answer a question, someone in the back muttered, "Know-it-all," just loud enough to be heard. The teacher acted like she hadn't heard anything. By lunchtime, Maya's stomach was in knots. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual chaos of hundreds of teenagers, but she felt like every eye was on her as she walked to an empty table in the corner. She unpacked her lunch. Her grandfather had made her favorite sandwich, but she couldn't bring herself to eat more than a few bites. Two girls from her English class walked past, giggling behind their hands. "I heard she sicked her dogs on some kids yesterday," one whispered, not bothering to keep her voice down. "They're like attacked dogs or something." "My mom says those kinds of dogs shouldn't be allowed in nice neighborhoods," the other replied. "They're dangerous." Maya's grip tightened on her sandwich. Valor and Echo were the gentlest dogs she knew, unless they were protecting someone, just like her grandfather had trained them to do. She spent the rest of lunch picking at her food and trying to look absorbed in her phone. Messages from her old friends back in Atlanta filled the screen, asking how the new school was going. Maya couldn't bring herself to tell them the truth. The afternoon classes dragged by in a blur of sideways glances and whispered comments. In history, they were covering the civil rights movement, and Maya felt her face burn as the teacher talked about how far we've come, while Chad Thompson smirked at her from across the room. When the final bell rang, Maya took her time packing up her books. She'd learned from yesterday. Better to wait until most students had left before heading out. She stopped by her locker, noting that someone had tried to scrub off the marker, but only managed to smear it into an even uglier stain. Finally, thinking the coast was clear, Maya pushed open the heavy front doors and stepped into the afternoon sunlight. Her heart sank immediately. Chad's red pickup was idling in the parking lot, Kyle and Derek lounging against the tailgate. They spotted her instantly. "Well, look who it is," Chad called out, his voice carrying across the nearly empty lot. "The dog whisperer herself." "Bet she thinks she's better than us," Kyle added, pushing off from the truck. "With her fancy trained mutts." Derek pulled out his phone, probably hoping to catch another viral moment. "Maybe we should show her what we do to people who don't know their place around here." Maya's feet felt frozen to the concrete. She could turn around, go back inside, but that would mean letting them win. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her head again. "Standing up for yourself isn't making trouble." "Hey!" Chad shouted, taking a step forward. "We're talking to you, Nye!" The door behind Maya swung open with a metallic creak. Mrs. Henderson, her English teacher, walked out carrying a stack of papers. "Is everything all right out here?" she asked, looking between Maya and the boys with sudden concern. Chad's face shifted instantly into an innocent smile. "Yes, ma'am. We were just leaving." "Good," Mrs. Henderson said firmly. "Then I suggest you do that." The three boys climbed into the truck, Chad revving the engine one last time before peeling out of the parking lot. Maya could see them laughing through the windows as they drove away. Mrs. Henderson turned to Maya. "Do you need a ride home, dear?" Maya shook her head, clutching her backpack straps. "No, thank you. I'm fine." But they both knew she wasn't fine. And they both knew this wasn't over. Maya pushed her green beans around her plate, the fork scraping against the ceramic in the quiet kitchen. The overhead light cast warm shadows across the wooden table where she sat with her grandfather. Valor and Echo lay nearby, their ears perking up at every small sound from outside. "Something's bothering you," Luther said quietly, setting down his glass of water. It wasn't a question. After raising Maya for the past 5 years, he could read her moods like a book. Maya sighed, finally letting her fork rest. The kids at school, it's getting worse. Luther's face remained calm, but his jaw tightened slightly. Tell me everything. Someone wrote, "Go home," on my locker today, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. And those boys, the ones from yesterday? They're always watching me, following me, making comments. What kind of comments? Luther's tone was measured, careful. Racist stuff. About me, about us living here. Maya swallowed hard. About Valor and Echo, too. They're spreading rumors that the dogs are dangerous, that we shouldn't be allowed to have them in the neighborhood. Luther set his silverware down and folded his hands on the table. The overhead light caught the silver in his close-cropped hair. Have you told any teachers? One of them, Mrs. Henderson. She saw the boys hassling me after school today. She made them leave, but… Maya shrugged. It didn't feel like she really wanted to get involved. And the other teachers? They pretend not to notice. Or maybe they really don't. Maya pushed her plate away, no longer hungry. It's like everyone's waiting for us to just give up and leave. Luther was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. You remember what I taught you about training Valor and Echo? Maya nodded. Patience and persistence. That's right. Sometimes the hardest part of training isn't teaching the dog, it's outlasting their stubbornness. He reached across the table and took Maya's hand. These people, they're trying to wear us down, make us tired enough to give up. I know, Maya said, but it's hard, Grandpa. Every day, it's like walking into a battle. You're stronger than they think, Luther said firmly. Stronger than maybe you think, too. He squeezed her hand. But you don't have to fight this battle alone. Maya looked up at him. What do you mean? I think we should document everything that's happening. The vandalism, the harassment, all of it. Take pictures, write it down, build our case. Luther's military training showed in his strategic thinking. Give it a week. If things don't improve, we'll take it to the principal with evidence they can't ignore. You really think that will help? Sometimes the system works, if you know how to use it properly. Luther smiled slightly. And if it doesn't? Well, we'll figure out our next move then. Maya felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Having a plan, even a simple one, made things feel more manageable. Okay, 1 week. In the meantime, Luther added, you keep your head high. Don't let them see you're scared. But don't do anything to provoke them either. We'll handle this the right way. Maya nodded, pushing back from the table. I'm going to start on my homework. Leave your plate, Luther said. I'll clean up tonight. In her room, Maya tried to focus on her algebra problems, but her mind kept wandering. The dogs had followed her upstairs, and their presence was comforting. Valor lay across her doorway, while Echo settled near her desk, both alert and protective. After an hour of half-hearted studying, Maya walked to her window. The full moon hung low and bright over the suburban landscape, casting silver light across the neat lawns and identical houses. The streets were empty and quiet, peaceful in a way that felt deceptive now that she knew what lurked beneath the surface. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching her breath fog the window. The neighborhood had seemed so perfect when they first moved in, the kind of place where her grandfather could enjoy his retirement, where she could focus on school and maybe make new friends. Now every shadow held potential threats, every friendly smile masked possible hatred. The moonlight caught the chrome trim on a car parked down the street, making it flash briefly like a signal. Maya squinted, trying to make out if it was Chad's truck, but it was too dark to tell. Valor lifted his head, sensing her unease, and came to stand beside her at the window. Maya scratched behind his ears, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "We'll be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to the dog. "We just have to be strong for a little while longer." The moon continued its arc across the sky, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Willow Creek. Maya stood at the window a while longer, watching the quiet street, trying to believe that tomorrow would be better. The final bell rang through Willow Creek High's crowded halls. Maya gathered her books slowly, waiting for most students to clear out before heading to her locker. She'd learned it was safer that way, less chance of accidental shoulder checks or whispered threats. The afternoon sun blazed through the school's glass doors as Maya stepped outside. Heat shimmered off the asphalt of the empty parking lot, and the Georgia humidity wrapped around her like a heavy blanket. She adjusted her backpack straps and started down the familiar route home. The first few blocks passed quietly. Maya walked beneath the sprawling oak trees that lined the subdivision's streets, their shadows offering brief respites from the sun. She tried to focus on peaceful things: the chemistry test she'd aced that morning, the new trick she was teaching Echo, the weekend ahead with her grandfather. An engine's low rumble broke through her thoughts. Maya's shoulders tensed, but she kept walking at the same pace. The vehicle crept closer, moving barely faster than she walked. She didn't need to look back to know who it was. She recognized the distinct sound of Chad Thompson's modified pickup truck. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and not just from the heat. The truck maintained its slow, stalking pace behind her as she turned onto Maple Drive. Maya's pulse quickened. This street curved sharply ahead, hidden from view of the main road by a thick cluster of trees and shrubs. The truck's engine revved suddenly, making her jump. Laughter echoed from inside the cab. "Hey, Maya!" Kyle's voice called out. "Why you walking so fast? We just want to talk." Maya kept her eyes forward, quickening her pace slightly. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her head. "Don't run. It only encourages them." But every instinct screamed at her to flee. "What's wrong?" Derek's sneering voice joined in. "Too good to talk to us?" The truck pulled alongside her now. Maya could see Chad behind the wheel from the corner of her eye, that familiar smirk on his face as he matched her speed. "Maybe she thinks she's better than us," Chad said loudly to his friends. "Living in our neighborhood, acting like she belongs here." Maya's hands clenched into fists, but she maintained her stride. 3 more blocks to home. Just 3 more blocks. The truck suddenly accelerated ahead of her, tires squealing against pavement. Maya's heart lurched as it swung around in a wide arc, cutting across both lanes to block the road ahead. The driver's side door flew open, and Chad jumped out. Kyle and Derek piled out the passenger's side. Maya stopped, her breath catching in her throat. The 3 boys spread out across the street, creating a wall of sneering faces and hostile postures. "Going somewhere?" Chad asked, taking a step forward. His Letterman jacket was tied around his waist, and his t-shirt was dark with sweat in the afternoon heat. Maya glanced over her shoulder. The way back was clear, but it would mean retreating from her planned route home. She'd have to circle around through unfamiliar streets. "Move," she said, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. Kyle laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the surrounding houses. "Or what? You gonna call those mutts of yours?" "Yeah," Derek chimed in, phone already out and recording. "Let's see those dangerous dogs everyone's talking about." Chad took another step closer. "Your grandfather can't protect you forever. Neither can those animals." Maya began backing away slowly, keeping all 3 boys in view. The racist slurs started then, growing louder as the boys advanced. Their words were ugly, designed to wound, to remind her they saw her as less than human. She continued her careful retreat, mind racing. Her grandfather's house was behind her now, but she'd have to circle the long way around. The boys matched her pace, maintaining their threatening formation while continuing their verbal assault. "Running away?" Chad called out. That's right. Go back where you came from. Maya's back hit something solid. A wooden fence marking someone's property line. The boys were about 20 feet away now, still advancing. She edged sideways along the fence, moving toward the intersection that would lead to her grandfather's street. Maybe we should help her pack, Kyle suggested, cracking his knuckles. Maybe we should, Chad agreed, his smile turning cruel. What do you think, Maya? Want some help moving out? Maya's breath came in short gasps now as she continued her sideways retreat. The boys spread out wider, trying to cut off her escape routes. Derek kept his phone trained on her, probably hoping to catch her reaction for whatever edited video they planned to share later. The corner of her grandfather's street was just ahead. Maya knew if she could make it there, she'd be close to home, close to safety, close to Valor and Echo. "What's wrong, Maya?" Chad called out, voice dripping with mock concern. "Don't you want to be friends? We're just trying to help you understand where you belong." Maya backed around the corner, keeping her eyes on the advancing bullies. Her grandfather's house was just a few houses down now. She could see their front yard, the American flag her grandfather insisted on flying, the well-tended flower beds they'd planted together. The boys quickened their pace, forcing her to retreat faster. Their taunts grew louder, bolder, more vicious. They knew this part of the neighborhood well, knew there were rarely any witnesses around this time of day. Maya's heel caught on an uneven section of sidewalk. She stumbled slightly, but caught herself. The momentary show of vulnerability drew hoots of laughter from her pursuers. "Careful now," Chad called out. "Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself before you get our message." She was almost to her grandfather's yard now, just a little further. The boys closed in, their faces twisted with cruel anticipation, forcing her to back up faster toward the familiar driveway. Maya's back hit the edge of her grandfather's lawn. The boys had her cornered now, forming a tight semicircle barely 10 feet away. Their faces were flushed with excitement and cruel anticipation. "Nowhere left to run," Chad taunted, taking another step forward. "Time to learn your lesson about—" Maya's fingers flew to her lips. A sharp, piercing whistle cut through the humid afternoon air. The response was instant. Two dark shapes exploded from behind the row of hydrangeas along the side of the house. Valor and Echo moved like living shadows, their powerful bodies launching across the grass with military precision. The dogs positioned themselves perfectly between Maya and the bullies, their stance wide and protective. Their ears were pinned back, hackles raised along their spines. Deep, thunderous growls rumbled from their chests, echoing off the surrounding houses. Chad stumbled backward, all his previous bravado evaporating. His face went pale as Echo's lips pulled back, revealing rows of gleaming white teeth. Kyle dropped his phone, the device clattering across the sidewalk as he raised his trembling hands. "Oh no," Derek whispered, voice cracking. "Oh no! Oh no!" The dogs didn't advance, but their growls grew deeper. They held their ground with the disciplined restraint of their military training, muscles coiled and ready. Valor's dark eyes tracked every tiny movement the boys made, while Echo's focused gaze never left Chad's face. Maya stood tall behind her protectors, heart still racing but chin lifted. The tables had turned so quickly. Now it was the bullies who were backing away, fear replacing their earlier cruelty. "Call them off!" Chad's voice was high and panicked. "Jesus Christ, call them off!" "They won't move unless you do," Maya said calmly, though her hands were shaking. "Back away slowly, and they'll stay right here." Kyle was already retreating, nearly tripping over his own feet. "Chad, man, let's go. Let's just go." The quiet afternoon air filled with the sounds of the dogs' continued growls and the scuffling of the boys' shoes as they backed away. Derek had gone completely white, looking like he might pass out at any moment. "What's going on out here?" The shout came from across the street. Mr. Harrison, their neighbor, burst out of his front door. He was red-faced and already pointing an accusing finger. "Someone call the police!" he yelled, his voice carrying across the entire cul-de-sac. "This girl just set her dogs on these boys." Maya's stomach dropped. "No, that's not what—" "They attacked us!" Chad found his voice again, emboldened by the adult presence. "We were just walking by, and she sicked those monsters on us." Mr. Harrison was already pulling out his phone. "I'm calling 911 right now. Those dangerous animals need to be contained." "They were chasing me," Maya protested. But Mr. Harrison was already speaking rapidly into his phone. "Yes? Emergency? There's a situation on Oak Ridge Lane. A black girl just set 2 aggressive dogs on some neighborhood kids. They look like attack dogs. We need police here immediately." Other neighbors were emerging now, drawn by the commotion. Maya saw phones being raised, recording the scene. But they were only capturing the aftermath. The dogs still in their protective stance, the innocent boys looking scared. "Please," Maya tried again. "They were threatening me." "The dogs were just—" "Keep those animals back!" Mr. Harrison shouted, cutting her off. "I've already called the police. They're on their way." The bullies had backed up to the edge of the yard now. Chad's terror was already being replaced by a smug smile as he watched the adults rushing to their defense. "You heard him," Chad called out, his voice steady again. "Better get control of your dangerous dogs before the cops show up." Maya felt tears burning in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Valor and Echo remained perfectly still, waiting for her command, while the quiet suburban street erupted into chaos around them. She could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer. Mr. Harrison was still shouting into his phone, "Yes, they're still here! 2 German shepherds, clearly trained to attack. These poor boys could have been killed." Maya's hands clenched into fists as she watched the scene unfold, watched as the truth was twisted right in front of her. The dogs had protected her, had done exactly what they were supposed to do. But now, somehow, she was being painted as the aggressor. The first police car rounded the corner, lights flashing. Chad and his friends backed further away, their faces masks of false innocence, as Mr. Harrison waved the officers over. "Here! Over here!" he called out. "These vicious dogs need to be contained before someone gets hurt." The police cruiser's red and blue lights painted the peaceful suburban street in harsh, alternating colors. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts as they surveyed the scene. Maya's heart pounded as she watched them immediately turn their attention to Mr. Harrison, who was already rushing forward to meet them. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," Mr. Harrison called out, pointing toward Maya and the dogs. "Those attack dogs nearly mauled these boys." "That's not true," Maya's voice cracked with desperation. "They were chasing me. They cornered me right here on my own lawn." The taller officer, his nameplate reading Matthews, barely glanced in her direction. Instead, he focused on Chad and his friends, who had mastered looking shell-shocked and innocent. "You boys okay?" Officer Matthews asked, his tone gentle and concerned. "We were just walking by," Chad said, his voice trembling perfectly. "And she whistled, and these huge dogs came charging at us." The second officer, Peterson, turned toward Maya's house. "Who owns these animals?" "I do." Luther's deep voice carried across the lawn as he emerged from the front door, his movements measured and calm despite the chaos. "I'm Sergeant Luther Bell, retired Army K-9 handler. These are my trained service dogs. Sir, you need to get those dogs under control immediately," Officer Peterson demanded, his hand shifting to rest on his weapon. Luther's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Valor, Echo, heel." The dogs immediately responded, moving to sit at attention by his side, though their eyes remained fixed on the bullies. "Grandpa, please tell them," Maya pleaded. "Those boys were following me, threatening me. The dogs were protecting me." "Sir, we're going to need you to leash those animals," Officer Matthews cut in, completely ignoring Maya's words. "Animal control is already en route." Luther reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out 2 leashes. "Officers, these dogs are highly trained military animals. They responded exactly as they're supposed to when they detected a threat to my granddaughter. If you'll just listen. The only threat here was those dogs attacking innocent kids," Mr. Harrison interrupted. More neighbors had gathered now, forming a loose circle around the scene. Many had their phones out, recording everything. "We need to see registration records for both animals," Officer Peterson demanded. "Of course," Luther replied calmly. "They're inside. But first, I think we need to hear what actually happened here." "Maya." The sound of another vehicle approaching cut him off. A white van with "Animal Control" emblazoned on the side pulled up to the curb. "No," Maya whispered, her voice breaking. "No, please, they didn't do anything wrong." A uniformed animal control officer stepped out, already pulling out catch poles. "We got a report of aggressive dogs attacking minors?" "These dogs didn't attack anyone," Maya shouted, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "They saved me. Why won't anyone listen?" But the officers were already moving forward, directing Luther to hand over the leashes. Maya watched in horror as Valor and Echo were led toward the van, their proud heads held high even now. "You can't take them," Maya screamed, starting forward. Luther caught her arm, holding her back gently but firmly. "Please, they're trained military dogs. They were protecting me." "Maya," Luther said softly, his own voice tight with controlled anger. "We'll sort this out. I promise." "Sir, we need to impound these animals for public safety evaluation," the animal control officer stated flatly. "You can retrieve them after a formal hearing." Chad and his friends stood at the edge of the gathering crowd, barely concealing their smirks as they watched the dogs being loaded into the van. Kyle had retrieved his phone and was filming everything. "Officers, please," Luther tried one more time, his military bearing evident in his straight spine and steady gaze. "I have all their documentation. These dogs have years of service records. They're highly trained and responded to a legitimate threat to my granddaughter. If you'll just—" "Sir, this is non-negotiable," Officer Matthews cut him off. "The animals need to be evaluated after an incident like this. You can present your documentation at the hearing." Maya buried her face in her grandfather's side, sobbing as she heard the van's doors slam shut. Through her tears, she could see neighbors shaking their heads, whispering among themselves. Mr. Harrison stood with his arms crossed, nodding in satisfaction. "You'll be hearing from the Homeowners Association about this," Mr. Harrison called out. "Dangerous animals like that have no place in our neighborhood." The animal control van pulled away, carrying Valor and Echo with it. Maya felt like her heart was being torn out as she watched them disappear around the corner. Her protectors, her friends, taken away while the real threats stood free, surrounded by sympathetic adults who refused to hear the truth. The police officers were already turning away, speaking in low voices with Chad and his friends, asking if they wanted to press charges. The crowd of neighbors began to disperse, many still filming with their phones, their whispers carrying across the quiet street. Maya looked up at her grandfather through tear-filled eyes. Luther's face was set in stone, but she could see the muscle working in his jaw, could feel the tension in his body as he held her close. They stood alone in their front yard, watching as their peaceful suburban dream crumbled around them, replaced by the harsh reality of what they were truly up against. Maya sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched hot chocolate that had long since gone cold. The house felt empty without the click of dog nails on the hardwood floors, without Valor's watchful presence or Echo's gentle head resting on her knee. Luther paced the kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear, his normally calm voice edged with frustration. "Ma'am, these are trained military service animals with complete documentation. They responded exactly as they were trained to do when—" He stopped, listening, his free hand clenching into a fist. "No, you're not understanding. They were protecting my granddaughter from—" Maya could hear the tinny sound of the woman on the other end, cutting him off again. She watched her grandfather close his eyes, taking a deep breath. "Yes, I understand protocol, but—" Another pause. "Monday. That's 4 days from now. These dogs have special dietary needs and training requirements. They can't just sit in your facility for—" He stopped again, jaw working. "Fine. Yes. I'll bring the documentation Monday morning." He ended the call and set the phone down carefully on the counter, though Maya could tell he wanted to throw it. "They won't listen?" she asked softly, already knowing the answer. "They're following procedure," Luther replied, spitting the words out like they tasted bad. "Won't release the dogs until after a formal hearing. Won't even let me see them until Monday." Maya's phone buzzed on the table. She'd been ignoring the notifications for the past hour, but something made her look this time. Her stomach dropped. "Grandpa," she whispered, turning the phone so he could see. "Look." On her screen was a TikTok video, already gaining thousands of views. The footage, clearly shot by Kyle, showed only the moment Valor and Echo charged forward, their teeth bared. It was edited to start right there. No sign of the boys following her, cornering her, threatening her. The caption read, "Crazy girl sets attack dogs on innocent kids in peaceful neighborhood." Luther leaned in, his expression darkening as he read the comments flowing in. "Those dogs should be put down. This is why those people don't belong in nice neighborhoods. Bet she trained them to attack white people. Time to call the HOA and get them out." Maya's hands shook as she scrolled. The video had already been shared to local Facebook groups and community forums. Each repost added more twisted details, more hateful speculation. "They're lying," she said, her voice small. "They're making it look like, I know, baby girl." Luther pulled out a chair and sat beside her, placing his strong hand over hers. "But we've got truth on our side, and I've got some calls to make." Maya's phone kept buzzing. The video was spreading faster now, reaching neighborhood watch groups and local news tip lines. A notification showed Mr. Harrison had shared it to the Willow Creek Community Forum with a long post about dangerous elements threatening their children. "Look at these comments," Maya whispered, unable to stop reading despite the pain each one caused. "They're saying we should be arrested, that we planned this, that we're terrorists." Luther gently took the phone from her hands and set it face down on the table. "Maya, look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his steady gaze. "What do we know about truth?" he asked, his voice carrying the same strength it had when he first taught her to work with Valor and Echo. "Truth stands," she replied automatically, reciting the lesson he'd taught her so many times. "That's right, truth stands. They can edit videos, spread lies, try to twist everything around, but truth stands." He squeezed her hand. "We're going to fight this, the right way, with dignity, with evidence, and with truth." Maya nodded, drawing strength from his certainty, but she couldn't help glancing at her phone as it buzzed again. The local Nextdoor app was blowing up now, filled with posts from neighbors she'd never even met, calling her family a threat to community safety. "How?" she asked. "How do we fight when nobody wants to hear our side?" "We document everything," Luther said firmly. "We gather evidence. We find allies. We use the system the right way." He stood up, his military bearing showing through as he straightened his spine. "I've got some old contacts from my K-9 unit days, people who know me, know my training methods, and I bet if we look hard enough, We'll find some neighbors brave enough to stand up for what's right." Maya watched as he picked up his own phone and started scrolling through contacts. It was nearly midnight now, but she could see from his expression that he didn't plan on sleeping until he'd set their defense in motion. "What about Valor and Echo?" she asked, her voice catching. Luther paused his scrolling to look at her, his eyes softening. "We'll get them back. Those dogs have protected us, and now it's our turn to protect them. We're going to fight this injustice together, Maya. All of us." She nodded, sitting up straighter in her chair. On her phone, the hate continued to pour in, but her grandfather's words echoed in her mind. Truth stands. Maya's steps echoed through the empty hallway as she arrived early, hoping to avoid the crowds. Her shoulders were tight, braced for whatever the day might bring. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she approached her locker, only to stop short. Someone had taped printed copies of the viral video screenshots all over it. Below them, in thick black marker, "Dog girl attacks innocent kids." Her hands trembled as she tore down the papers, crumpling them into balls. The sound of approaching voices made her work faster, her heart pounding. "There she is," a girl's voice carried down the hall. "The one who tried to get Chad and them killed." Maya kept her eyes down, focusing on working her locker combination. More footsteps approached, more whispers. "I heard those dogs were like trained attack weapons. My mom says they should arrest her whole family. Can't believe they let someone like that come to our school." Maya grabbed her books and slammed the locker shut, turning to find a wall of hostile faces. Some students quickly looked away. Others stared openly with disgust or fear. A few recorded her with their phones. In first period English, nobody would sit near her. Her usual desk partner had moved across the room, leaving an empty circle of seats around Maya. Even the teacher seemed uncertain, their eyes skipping over her during discussion. By lunch, the whispers had grown bolder. As Maya walked through the cafeteria carrying her tray, conversations stopped and started like waves. "Probably trained those dogs to attack white people. My dad's on the HOA board. Says they're getting eviction notices ready. Should have stayed in whatever ghetto they came from." A foot shot out, catching Maya's ankle. She stumbled, her tray clattering to the floor. Laughter erupted around her as milk soaked into her shoes. "Oops," said Jessica, one of Kyle's friends. "Guess you're not so tough without your attack dogs, huh?" Maya knelt to pick up her scattered lunch, keeping her face carefully blank even as her eyes burned. A wadded-up napkin hit her shoulder. Then another. "Hey!" A sharp voice cut through the chaos. "That's enough!" Ms. Franklin, the school counselor, strode through the cafeteria. The napkin throwing stopped immediately. The black woman's heels clicked purposefully on the tile as she reached Maya's side. "Anyone I catch participating in harassment will be dealing with immediate disciplinary action," she announced, her voice carrying across the now quiet room. She helped Maya up. "Come with me, sweetie. Let's get you some fresh lunch." In Ms. Franklin's office, Maya sat with a new tray while the counselor made a phone call. "Mr. Bell? This is Ms. Franklin from Willow Creek High. I think we need to have a conversation about what's happening with Maya." "Yes, I agree. Can you come in now?" 20 minutes later, Luther arrived, still wearing his work clothes from his security job. Ms. Franklin closed her office door and pulled the shade. "First," she said, sitting behind her desk, "I want you both to know I've seen the full story making rounds on social media, and I don't believe it for a second. I've worked with enough students to know when something's being twisted." Maya felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Finally, an adult who would listen. "Thank you, ma'am," Luther said. "We appreciate that. However, Ms. Franklin continued, folding her hands, "I need to be honest about what you're up against here. Chad Thompson's father is the HOA president. Kyle Briggs's mother sits on the school board. The Collins family has been here for 3 generations and practically owns half the businesses in town. So they get away with anything, Maya said bitterly. They're used to it, Ms. Franklin agreed, but that doesn't make it right. I've seen too many families like yours get pushed out because nobody stood up to these people. She leaned forward. I want to help. I've already started documenting the harassment I've witnessed today. Luther nodded slowly. We'd appreciate any support you can offer, Ms. Franklin. Maya's been dealing with their bullying since day 1, but now with the dogs taken, I heard about that. Ms. Franklin's expression darkened. Classic move. Twist the victim into the aggressor. They'll try to use the HOA bylaws about dangerous pets to force you out. They've done it before. Before? Maya asked. To the Johnsons, last year. They had a rescue pit bull. One complaint about the dog looking aggressive. And suddenly, they were drowning in fines and violations until they had to move. She shook her head. But your case is different. You have military documentation for those dogs, training records, service history. We can fight this. We intend to, Luther said firmly. Good. Ms. Franklin pulled out a notebook. Now, Maya, I need you to tell me everything that's happened, from the beginning. Every incident, every threat, every witness. We're going to document it all. Maya straightened in her chair, drawing strength from the presence of 2 adults who finally believed her. As she began to speak, Ms. Franklin's pen moved across the page, recording truth to stand against the lies. The evening sun cast long shadows across Oak Ridge Lane as Maya and Luther walked door to door. Most neighbors peered through windows but wouldn't answer. Others opened their doors just wide enough to say, "Sorry, can't help," before quickly shutting them again. This is useless, Maya muttered after their 10th rejection. Her feet ached, and the weight of the day's harassment sat heavy on her shoulders. Don't lose heart, Luther said, his voice gentle but firm. Truth has a way of coming out. He checked his notepad. Mrs. Patel is next. She's usually home around this time. They approached a neat 2-story house with carefully tended flower beds. Wind chimes tinkled softly on the porch. Maya remembered seeing Mrs. Patel tending her garden when they first moved in, offering a friendly wave. Luther pressed the doorbell. Through the decorative glass panels, they saw movement inside. After a long pause, the door opened partially, secured by a chain. Yes? Mrs. Patel's dark eyes darted between them nervously. Good evening, ma'am, Luther said, keeping his voice low and respectful. I apologize for disturbing you. We're trying to gather evidence about what happened with my granddaughter yesterday afternoon. Mrs. Patel glanced up and down the street. I saw something on the community Facebook page. That video doesn't show the whole truth, Maya said, trying to keep the frustration from her voice. Those boys were chasing me. They had me cornered. Mrs. Patel's expression softened as she looked at Maya. I know, she said quietly. I saw it happen. Maya's heart jumped. You did? The woman nodded, then unlatched the chain. Please, come inside quickly. They followed her into a living room filled with the scent of curry and warm spices. Family photos lined the walls, children in graduation robes, wedding celebrations, multi-generational gatherings. Sit, sit, Mrs. Patel gestured to the couch. She perched on an armchair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've been feeling terrible about not speaking up yesterday when the police came, but my husband, he was worried about making trouble. We know how things work here. We understand, Luther assured her. Many people are afraid to challenge the status quo. But this isn't right, Mrs. Patel said firmly. Those boys, I've seen how they treat people who are different. Last year, they bullied my nephew when he visited from Mumbai. Called him terrible names. She stood suddenly. Wait here. She hurried to a small table near the front door and picked up a tablet. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. I have one of those video doorbells. It records everything that happens in front of my house. She sat between them on the couch. Look. The footage showed Maya walking past Mrs. Patel's house, head down, moving quickly. Moments later, the three boys appeared, following her, their postures aggressive. The camera's microphone picked up their taunts clearly. Hey, dog girl, where you running to? This ain't your neighborhood. Maybe we should teach her a lesson. Maya flinched at their voices. Luther's jaw tightened. The video continued, showing Maya backing away as they advanced, cornering her against the edge of her yard. Only then did the dogs appear, responding to her whistle. This proves they were the aggressors, Luther said. May we have a copy of this footage? Mrs. Patel nodded, but her hands trembled slightly as she worked to export the video. You won't tell them it came from me? The Thompsons are very influential in the HOA, and my husband's business depends on local contracts. Your name won't be mentioned, Luther promised. We'll protect you like you're protecting Maya. Mrs. Patel emailed the video file to Luther's phone. I'm sorry I can't do more. When we first moved here 10 years ago, we faced similar problems. Not as bad, but we learned to keep quiet, to blend in. She looked at Maya. Sometimes I'm ashamed of that choice. You're helping now, Maya said softly. That means a lot. They thanked Mrs. Patel and left through the back door at her request, cutting through her garden to reach their own yard. Once inside their kitchen, Luther immediately forwarded the video to two contacts. Ms. Franklin will know how to use this through proper channels at school, he explained as he typed. And Pastor Grant has been leading anti-racism efforts in this county for 20 years. He'll know how to bring this to light without putting Mrs. Patel at risk. Maya watched the last rays of sunlight fade outside their window. The yard felt empty without Valor and Echo patrolling it. But for the first time since the incident, she felt something like hope stirring in her chest. They had proof now. Real proof. The Willow Creek Community Clubhouse buzzed with angry voices as Maya and Luther walked through its double doors. Every head turned to stare. The room was packed, with people standing along the walls and clustering near the refreshment table. Maya's stomach tightened at the hostile glares. Luther placed a steady hand on her shoulder, guiding her to two empty seats near the back. He carried his laptop bag, holding it close. The projector screen was already pulled down at the front of the room, ready for the HOA's usual slideshow of violations and complaints. Just remember, Luther whispered, we have the truth on our side. Roger Thompson stood at the podium, his expensive suit and carefully styled hair projecting authority. Chad sat in the front row between Kyle and Derek, all three boys wearing identical smirks. Their parents flanked them, faces set in expressions of righteous anger. I call this emergency meeting to order, Roger announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the room. We're here to address a serious safety concern in our community. He clicked through several slides showing Valor and Echo, freeze-framed from Chad's edited video to look as menacing as possible. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. These dangerous animals were brought into our peaceful neighborhood without proper disclosure, Roger continued. Last week, they were unleashed on 3 of our children. That's not true, Maya said, her voice shaking but clear. Roger's eyes narrowed. Young lady, you'll have your turn to speak. As I was saying, these dogs represent a clear violation of our HOA bylaws regarding dangerous breeds and aggressive animals. He gestured to a stack of papers. I have here multiple witness statements describing the attack. We'll be voting tonight on whether to classify these animals as dangerous, requiring their permanent removal from our community. Maya felt tears burning behind her eyes. Luther squeezed her hand. Furthermore, Roger went on, we'll be discussing appropriate fines for this violation as well as the possibility of eviction proceedings if the situation isn't rectified immediately. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Chad turned in his seat to smirk at Maya. "Now, before we move to a vote, does anyone wish to speak on this matter?" Roger's tone made it clear he expected no opposition. Luther stood slowly, his military bearing evident in his straight spine and steady gaze. "I do." Roger's lip curled slightly. "Mr. Bell, while we appreciate your perspective, the video evidence is quite clear." "Is it?" Luther moved toward the front of the room, laptop in hand. "Because I have some evidence of my own to share." "We've all seen the video," Roger said dismissively. "There's no need." "Not this video," Luther interrupted, his voice firm. He reached the podium and opened his laptop. "This is unedited security footage from yesterday afternoon, showing exactly what happened before the dogs appeared." Roger's face tightened. "This meeting agenda has already been set. According to HOA bylaws, Section 7.3, Luther said calmly, any resident has the right to present relevant evidence at emergency meetings." He looked Roger in the eye. "You wouldn't want to violate the bylaws, would you, Mr. Thompson?" A few people chuckled nervously. Roger's jaw clenched, but he stepped aside. Luther connected his laptop to the projector. The room darkened, and the footage began to play. Maya watched the color drain from Chad's face as the video showed him and his friends following her down the street. Their cruel taunts echoed through the clubhouse speakers, making several people shift uncomfortably in their seats. "This ain't your neighborhood. Maybe we should teach her a lesson." The footage continued, crystal clear, as the boys cornered Maya against her yard. Only then did Valor and Echo appear, responding to her whistle of distress. Complete silence fell over the room. Maya could hear her own heart pounding as the video ended. Mrs. Thompson had her hand pressed to her mouth. Kyle's mother was staring at her son in horror. Derek's father looked like he might be sick. Luther's voice cut through the silence. The dogs did exactly what they were trained to do: protect someone in danger. They never attacked. They simply stood their ground until the threat retreated. He turned to face the crowd. "Now, shall we discuss who the real dangerous elements in this neighborhood are?" Roger Thompson stood frozen at the podium, his carefully constructed narrative crumbling before his eyes. For the first time since Maya had seen him, he had nothing to say. The silence stretched on, heavy with shock and shame, as the truth played over and over on the screen behind them. The silence shattered as Pastor Grant rose from his seat near the middle of the room. His commanding presence drew every eye as he moved deliberately toward the front. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his deep voice resonating through the clubhouse, "what we've witnessed here tonight isn't just about dogs or HOA violations. This is about something far more sinister." He turned to face the crowd, his expression grave. "For months, I've been collecting testimonies from families of color who've faced similar harassment in Willow Creek. Mysterious fines, selective enforcement of rules, anonymous threats." He pulled out a thick folder, and the pattern always leads back to the same people. Roger Thompson's face reddened. "Now, wait just a minute. No, Mr. Thompson, you've done enough talking." Pastor Grant's voice carried steel beneath its calm surface. "Did you think nobody would notice how you've used HOA regulations to target specific families? How every family that's been forced out in the last 2 years has been either Black, Hispanic, or Asian?" Phones appeared throughout the crowd, recording as Pastor Grant laid out his evidence. Through the windows, Maya spotted the distinctive lights of news vans pulling into the parking lot. "This isn't just about my granddaughter," Luther added, standing beside Pastor Grant. "It's about every family that's been driven away by your abuse of power." A reporter from Channel 5 News slipped through the door, camera crew in tow. More followed, their presence sending ripples of tension through the room. "These are baseless accusations," Roger sputtered, but his usual confidence had vanished. "The HOA simply enforces our community standards. Like the standard that got the Martinez family fined for their grandmother's medical equipment in the driveway?" Pastor Grant countered. "Or the standard that forced the Wongs to remove their traditional garden decorations while allowing identical items in other yards?" The cameras swung between Roger and Pastor Grant as more people stood up, finding their voices. "They fined us 3 times for our Christmas lights," Mrs. Patel called out from her seat. "But our white neighbors had the exact same setup. They threatened to put a lien on our house over supposed noise violations," another resident added. "But when the Thompsons throw late-night parties, nothing happens." Chad and his friends had lost their smirks, shrinking in their seats as the truth spilled out. Kyle's mother grabbed his arm, whispering furiously in his ear. 2 police officers appeared in the doorway, their presence sending a visible shiver through Roger Thompson and the other fathers. Maya recognized them, different officers from the ones who'd taken Valor and Echo. "Mr. Thompson," one officer called out, "we'd like to ask you some questions about a pattern of reported harassment." Roger's face went from red to pale. He grabbed his briefcase, knocking over his water bottle in his haste. "This meeting is adjourned. No further comments." "Running away, Roger?" Luther asked quietly. "Just like your son ran when the dogs showed up?" Chad's father spun around, jabbing a finger at Luther. "You haven't heard the last of this, Bell. You'll what?" Pastor Grant interrupted. "File more false complaints? Manufacture more violations? The whole world is watching now." The news cameras captured everything as Roger Thompson, face contorted with impotent rage, stormed toward the exit. Kyle's father and Derek's father hurried after him, pulling their sons along. They pushed past the reporters, ignoring shouted questions about discrimination and harassment. The officers followed them out, leaving behind a room humming with the energy of long-suppressed truths finally spoken aloud. Maya sat still in her chair, hardly daring to breathe. She watched the crowd's faces transform as realization dawned. The perfect suburban facade had cracked, revealing the rot beneath. Some looked ashamed, others relieved, but none could pretend anymore that Willow Creek's problems started or ended with her dogs. Reporters swarmed around Pastor Grant and Luther, microphones extended. Through the windows, Maya could see more police cars pulling into the parking lot where Roger Thompson and the others huddled, gesturing angrily as officers approached them with notebooks open. The mighty HOA president didn't look so powerful now, his authority crumbling like a sand castle at high tide. His carefully constructed world of selective rules and quiet threats was washing away in front of everyone's eyes. Mrs. Thompson hurried out after her husband, her heels clicking rapidly across the floor. Chad trailed behind her, head down, no longer the swaggering bully who had cornered Maya just days ago. The last Maya saw of him, he was sliding into the back seat of his father's luxury car, looking small and scared as reporters' cameras flashed around them. As darkness settled over Willow Creek, pinpricks of light began appearing along Oak Ridge Lane. One by one, neighbors emerged from their homes carrying candles, flashlights, and hastily made signs. They gathered on the sidewalk in front of Maya's house, their numbers growing steadily. Maya watched from her bedroom window, hardly believing her eyes. Mrs. Patel stood beside Mrs. Franklin, holding a sign that read, "Bring Valor and Echo home." The Martinez family had brought their entire extended clan, their children clutching drawings of German shepherds. Even Mr. Harrison, who had called the police days earlier, stood awkwardly at the edge of the crowd, his wife nudging him forward. "Maya," Luther called softly from her doorway, "come see this." They stepped out onto their front porch together. The The crowd fell quiet, then erupted in supportive cheers. Pastor Grant stood at the center, megaphone in hand. "Tonight," he announced, his voice carrying across the gathered faces, "we stand together to say no more. No more harassment, no more discrimination, no more silence in the face of injustice." Camera crews circled the edges of the vigil, their lights casting long shadows across the lawn. Maya recognized reporters from several local stations, their microphones extended toward different speakers in the crowd. "I was afraid to speak up before," Mrs. Patel said into one microphone, her voice trembling but determined. "We all were. But seeing what happened to Maya and her dogs, enough is enough." Luther squeezed Maya's shoulder as more neighbors stepped forward to share their stories. Years of quiet intimidation and selective enforcement poured out into the night air. The Martinez grandfather described how the HOA had tried to fine him for speaking Spanish to his grandchildren by the community pool. A Korean-American couple detailed their battle over unapproved cultural decorations during Lunar New Year. The crowd grew larger as more residents arrived, drawn by the lights and voices. Cars slowed as they passed, some parking to join the vigil. Maya spotted several of her classmates among the faces, including some who had laughed at Chad's jokes just days ago. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the back of the crowd. People turned and parted as a police car's lights began flashing at the intersection. Officer Martinez, no relation to the family, jumped out, radio crackling. "We've got a report," he called out to Luther. Someone heard barking behind the Thompson house. "We're heading there now." Maya's heart leaped. "Valor?" Luther was already moving. "Stay here with Pastor Grant," he ordered. But Maya was right behind him, several neighbors following as they rushed toward the Thompsons' house 3 blocks away. More police cars converged on the cul-de-sac. Officers spread out, flashlights sweeping across the manicured lawn. Maya heard it then. A familiar whimper from behind the detached garage. "There!" she pointed, her voice cracking. 2 officers rounded the corner with their lights raised. "Oh my God!" one gasped. Valor lay on his side, tied to a post with rope cutting into his neck. Blood matted his fur where someone had beaten him, but his tail thumped weakly against the ground when he saw Maya. "You bastards!" Luther's voice boomed across the yard. Roger Thompson stood in his back door, Chad white-faced beside him. Kyle's father emerged from the shadows of the garage, dropping a bloody baseball bat. "He attacked me!" Kyle's father shouted. "The dog was vicious!" "Save it for your lawyer," Officer Martinez snapped, drawing his handcuffs. Other officers surrounded the 3 men as neighbors and news crews spilled into the yard. Maya ran to Valor, falling to her knees beside him. He licked her hand as Luther and a police officer carefully cut away the ropes. Animal cruelty, criminal conspiracy, hate crimes. An officer listed off as he cuffed Roger Thompson. Chad started crying as another officer led him toward a squad car, all his swagger gone. "Where's Echo?" Luther demanded, his voice dangerous. "The other dog's at my house," Kyle's father admitted quickly, wilting under Luther's glare. "In the basement." "It was Roger's idea. He said if we got rid of the dogs, they'd have to leave." Camera flashes lit up the night as officers shoved the 3 men into separate police cars. Roger Thompson, self-appointed king of Willow Creek, slumped in the back seat as reporters shouted questions through the window. Chad caught Maya's eye just before an officer shut his door. For the first time, she saw real fear in his face. Not of dogs, but of consequences finally catching up to him. Neighbors helped Luther lift Valor carefully onto a blanket as animal control arrived to transport him to an emergency vet. Maya held his head in her lap, whispering that everything would be okay. Police sirens wailed through the quiet streets as the convoy of squad cars pulled away, carrying Willow Creek's fallen power brokers to face justice at last. The morning sun painted long shadows across Oak Ridge Lane as Maya stepped out her front door, Valor and Echo padding faithfully beside her. Both dogs moved a bit stiffly. Valor still healing from his injuries, Echo recovering from dehydration in Kyle's basement, but their tails wagged high as they breathed in the crisp autumn air. "Good morning, Maya," Mrs. Patel called from her garden. She straightened up from her flower bed, pulling off her gloves. "How are the dogs doing?" "Much better," Maya replied, managing a small smile. The emergency vet had kept Valor overnight, treating his cuts and bruises. Echo had been scared, but largely unharmed. They just need rest and regular walks. "Those monsters," Mrs. Patel muttered, shaking her head. She crossed her lawn to scratch behind the dog's ears. "I should have spoken up sooner about what I saw. I'm so sorry, dear." As they continued their walk, more neighbors emerged to greet them. The Martinez children ran out to hug the dogs, their parents following with fresh-baked treats. Even Mr. Harrison approached awkwardly, his wife nudging him forward. "I was wrong," he admitted, hands stuffed in his pockets. "What I saw that day, I made assumptions without knowing the whole story. It won't happen again." Maya nodded, not quite ready to forgive but appreciating the effort. Luther had taught her that change starts with acknowledgement. They passed the Thompson house, now quiet and empty. Yellow police tape still marked the garage where they'd found Valor. Maya heard snippets of conversation from other neighbors about Roger Thompson's arrest, making national news. "Did you see the press conference?" one woman asked another. "The DA is charging them with hate crimes, animal cruelty, criminal conspiracy." "Good," her friend replied firmly. "And I heard the school board met in emergency session last night. All 3 boys are expelled, and they're investigating other complaints about racist bullying." Maya's phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Franklin. "Meeting today at 2 p.m. to discuss new anti-harassment policies. The whole administration will be there. Your voice matters." They turned onto the main loop of the subdivision, where workers were taking down the Willow Creek Estates sign. The HOA board had resigned en masse after evidence emerged of years of discriminatory enforcement. A temporary committee of diverse residents, including Luther, would oversee elections for new leadership. Pastor Grant drove past in his car, honking and waving. He'd been instrumental in organizing community support and bringing media attention to the case. Now he was working with civil rights organizations to document similar cases of harassment in other exclusive suburbs. "Maya!" called a familiar voice. She turned to see Sarah Chen, a quiet girl from her history class, jogging over. "I'm really sorry about everything. Some of us are starting a student diversity club. Would you maybe want to help?" Before Maya could answer, more classmates appeared. They clustered around the dogs, asking about their recovery and sharing their own stories of witnessing Chad's bullying but being too scared to speak up. "The whole school's different now," Sarah explained, like people finally woke up. The principal announced mandatory sensitivity training for all students and staff. They passed the community clubhouse, where a sign announced Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Workshop, Saturday 2 a.m. All residents welcome. Another poster advertised the weekend barbecue, celebrating our whole community. Luther waited on their front porch when they circled back home. He held up his phone, showing a news alert. Local DA announces multiple felony charges in hate crime case. Roger Thompson, Kyle's father, and Derek's father are all facing serious prison time, he explained. The evidence from Mrs. Patel's camera, plus their own social media messages plotting to drive us out. It's all coming out now. Maya sat on the porch steps, both dogs laying their heads in her lap. The morning sun warmed her face as she watched neighbors walking past, waving and calling greetings. Children played freely in front yards, their laughter carrying on the breeze. The fear that had gripped the community was lifting, replaced by something new. Hope, perhaps. Or simply the relief of finally being honest. "You did this," Luther said softly, sitting beside her. "By staying strong. By not letting them break your spirit. You showed everyone what courage looks like." Maya stroked Valor's healed neck, remembering his loyalty that day on the sidewalk. Echo pressed closer, ever protective. These streets that had once felt so hostile now rang with friendly voices. Not perfect, not yet, but changing. "We did it together," she corrected, scratching both dogs' ears as they dozed in the morning light. "All of us." The weekend barbecue was already being set up in the park at the end of Oak Ridge Lane. Maya could see neighbors carrying tables, stringing lights between trees. Someone had hung a banner. "Welcome to the real Willow Creek, where everyone belongs." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.